we are starting from the very basic. Please notice the exam that you plan on taking is now called Digital SAT or DSAT. Now, just in case we don't know this already, so there used to be a paper version of the SAT. Not many people do have this assumption that they could either take the paper version of the SAT or the digital version of the SAT. Now, the paper version of the SAT was completely discontinued in March 2023 internationally. That means outside US. The change was adapted a year later in US, and in US, all of the SATs are now conducted digitally as well since March 2024. Now, by the word digital SAT, what we essentially mean over here is that you're supposed to take it on a laptop or a tablet, and we do recommend that you take it on a laptop and avoid taking it on a tablet. Now, the word digital does confuse a lot many students, and students do think that they can possibly take the SAT at their own home. So that's not how it works. Basically, you're still supposed to go to a testing center and of course, get registered with the college board, go to a center, and you're supposed to take your own laptop there with yourself to take the SAT. And if for some reason, if you do not have a laptop, so you can let college board know 1 month in advance that you will be needing a laptop so that they could ship it for you, but you have to let them know at least 1 month in advance. Now, that's something that we do not really advise because we're also used to using our own laptops. So we do not really recommend that you borrow a laptop from college board, and we do recommend that you take your own laptops with yourself. The previous SAT that we had was conducted on 7th of December. This is gone. There's nothing we can do about it now. The next SAT that we have is on 8th of March 2025, which I'm assuming most of you will be taking if you're in this class. Please notice, Peter, for the SAT, we have two broad components. One is English, and English is further broken down into reading and writing. And then the other one is maths. For both reading and writing and maths, we have two subsections. The terminology that we tend to use there in the SAT is module. So you have two modules for English, then you have two modules for maths. We have an app on which we will be taking our SAT. That app is called Blue Book app. So we tend to take our SAT on this application. You must have this downloaded in your laptop. So what you need to do is that you need to download this application. You need to sign up there with your college board details. And then you can pretty much log in there with your college board details. You can practice some papers on this app as well. And this is where you'll eventually be signing in and taking your SAT. Also remember that previously we had the calculator allowed on one maths module and we didn't have it allowed on the other module. Now we have the calculator allowed on both the modules of the SAT. You can now carry a calculator or use an on-screen calculator on the SAT. Previously, we didn't have it allowed on one module and we had it allowed on the other module. But now we have the calculator enabled or allowed on both modules of the math sections on the SAT. But in case if you feel like copying anything, so please do. In case if you have any question till here, so please do let me know and then I'll answer those for you.
Hello, sir. I have a question.
जी हिम्मत बेटा.
Sir, is there any sort of criteria like मैंने सुना हुआ है कि like जैसे आपने बताया दो मॉड्यूल हैं like reading and writing and then
जी जी.
maths के दो मॉड्यूल हैं module 1 and module 2. अब मैंने सुना था अगर you do not perform well in module 1 then उस module 2 जो होगा वो accordingly उसके होगा like अगर आपने अच्छा नहीं perform किया then it will be easy अगर आपने अच्छा perform किया then it will be hard. So is there any sort of thing like
You will
this?
come to that in the next 10 to 15 minutes because that's something what we call adaptiveness on the SAT. So we'll discuss that in today's class, but in the next 15 to 20 minutes, beta. Now, beta, coming to the basics of the test, we do have 54 questions in the English section on the SAT. And for that time duration that we have is 64 minutes. When it comes to maths, we have 44 questions and we have 70 minutes. So as you can see over here in English that you have a little over 1 minute per question for the English questions on the SAT. That's for English, just by the way. And for the maths, we have 70 minutes for 44 questions. So once again, over here, you have a little over 1.5 minutes per question for the mathematics portion, for the maths questions. Now, if I could further break it down, so you're going to have 32 minutes for each module. That is a total of 64 minutes once again. And you're going to have 27 questions in each of the modules of the English. Now, when it comes to maths, you're going to have 35 minutes for each module of maths. And you're going to have 22 questions in each module of the maths paper, now math section. Now, what you must remember is that the entire English portion is based on MCQs, whereas in maths, 33 questions will be MCQ. The remaining 11 are what we call students produced responses. As in these questions, you're supposed to put in your answer manually through a keyboard. So, for example, if your answer is 5/2, so you're supposed to put in 5/2 through a keyboard. If your answer is 250, so you're supposed to put in 250 through a keyboard, whereas the remaining 33 questions in the maths portion would be MCQs. In case, but if you feel like copying this, you can pretty much copy this and then we'll proceed. Now, but the next thing that we must remember is that how exactly the scoring is done on the SAT. So please remember, the SAT is graded on a scale of 400 to 1600, and it's not really graded on a scale of 0 to 1600. By that, what I essentially mean here is that if you were to register for the SAT and if you do not show up there for some reason, you would still be getting 400 points. This, you would not be getting a 0 if you do not go there to take the SAT for some reason. You would still be getting 400. So please notice the SAT is graded on a scale of 400 to 1600. You're not graded on a scale of 0 to 1600. Once again, if you were to break it down section wise, so the maximum marks you could have there in the English would be 800. The maximum marks you could have there on the maths would be 800. And likewise, the reading and writing or the English portion is graded on a scale of 200 to 800. Likewise, maths is also graded on a scale of 200 to 800. So the least marks you could have in English would be 200. Likewise, the least marks you could have on the maths would be 200. And the most marks you could have on English would be 800. And likewise, the most marks you could have there on the math section would also be 800. So that's something I'm assuming some of you would know, or maybe most of you would know. Also, but we do have some prerequisites to take the SAT, particularly if you are taking this class from Pakistan. So please remember, all of us, regardless of where you live, we are supposed to get registered with the college board in order to take the SAT. So you need to go to this website, get yourself registered with the college board in order to take the SAT. Also, if you're taking the SAT in Pakistan, so you're supposed to have a valid passport in order to take the SAT. Birth certificates or BAVE forms are not allowed. Please remember, we need the SAT, we need the passport on the day of the SAT. Now, in the Pakistani context, they are giving some relaxation when it comes to the passports, considering we do have some passport issues going on. So what you can do here is that you can actually get one made And let's just say if you do not get it by 8th of March, so you can simply let your testing center know that it's in the process, but you have not really received it just because of some problem on the part of the government, but you need to show them a slip that it's there in the process. So once you get your passport made, or whenever you go to get your passport made, you usually get a slip, so you can carry that slip with yourself if you do not have that passport available or ready by 8th of March. And ideally, if you do not have one made, so get one made ASAP, get it made on urgent basis. Also, please remember for Pakistani students, for Nepali students, for Bangladeshi students, birth certificates and wave forms are not allowed. Likewise, if you've been reading the information from the internet, so on the internet, you would see that they would say that you can pretty much bring your driving license to take the SAT, but please notice that's for US students. If you're taking the SAT in Pakistan, you're supposed to carry a valid passport with yourself on the day of the SAT. You do not need a passport. Once again, you do not really need a passport at the time of the registration. You need it on the day of the SAT. Another meaning that we have for the word valid over here is that your passport must not be expired, and the name on your passport must exactly match the name on your college board ID. So if, for example, if your name on your passport is Muhammad Ahmed, and if you have spelled it like this, Mohammed Ahmed, and if somehow mistakenly you've spelled like this on your college board ID, so they would assume that you're basically a different person and you're trying to trick them. Unless and you're not really trained, or maybe he could not notice this is spelling difference. But if it's a properly trained writer, and if they spot the difference, they would assume that you're possibly a different person and you're trying to somehow trick them or cheat them. So you need to make sure that the name on your passport must exactly match the details on your college board ID. Likewise, if your name is Muhammad Ahmed, let's say Varsi, so that's your first name, that's your middle name, that's your last name. So that's how you need to put that on your college board ID. No spelling difference will at all be acceptable, beta. So this is a very handy information. That's something that a lot many people do forget. So far I have had around easily 30 to 50 students who have yet forgotten their passports in my teaching career. So make sure that you remember this information, because this is your ticket to the testing center, beta. And if you're not writing it, at least take a screenshot for this information so that you do remember it. Now, but depending upon the fact which of the universities you plan on applying to, we have different sorts of admissions. Now, if some of you is in AS currently or first year, so this information is relevant for you because you will be applying to the universities next year when you're in A2 or in your second year. Now, we have one set of admission, we call it EA and ED. So remember, action will be taken by, because it's you who's going to apply to the university. Decision, of course, is taken by the universities that you plan on applying to. So what happens in an early action and early decision is that it allows you simply to apply earlier than most of the people are applying. I'll show you some of the statistics in a bit. And what happens in early action is that you basically apply to the university. For example, for the students who are in currently second year in A2, they will be applying to the universities by November 2024. And they will be submitting their transcripts, personal statements, letter recommendations, SAT scores, internships, submissions, their extracurricular activities, everything by November 2024. And they'll get to hear from the universities by mid of December. That's what we call early action and early decision. Now, in regular action, what people do is that they tend to apply by mid of January or late of January, and they get to hear from the universities by March or between March and May. Now, some of you would be thinking, sir, why exactly are we taking the SAT now in case if we can't apply now? So this is only for the universities that offer early admissions and regular admissions, and not all of the universities offer early admissions and regular admissions. For example, LUMS only offer regular admissions. IBA only offers regular admissions. It's only for some of the top universities globally and largely in US, because these we tend to use these terms for the universities based in US. So in case if any of you is in AS currently and plans on applying to one of the Ivy Leagues, so this information would come handy for you. And in your case, it will be November 2025, because you have to submit everything, including your SAT scores, your transcripts, your letter of recommendations, your personal statements, your ECAs, your internship certificates, and if you've done any sort of community work, everything, the terminology that we use for all of these things, the umbrella term here is materials that we tend to use. We'll have to submit everything by November 2025. If you're in A2 and if you plan on applying to one of the Ivy Leagues, these universities late, currently in A2 or in second year of your intermediate. So now you're late for that. Now, in case if you plan on applying to other schools which are not among the top 8 of these universities, or let's say top 20 of these universities in US, so you can still apply in March 2024. You can take the SAT in March 2024, and you could still get in for most of the universities. Sorry, March 2025, my bad. But this information that is set over here is only relevant to the universities that do offer early actions and early decision, and then regular actions and regular decision. There are few other terminologies that we must get acquainted with, because some of you may have these questions in your mind, specifically through the internet or through your schools. So there are some universities that went test optional back in 2020 during the COVID, because what used to happen is that usually 1 day or 2 days before the SAT, the actual SAT, they would simply announce that the testing center would be the testing center would not be offering the SAT because of the COVID outbreak, and the SAT used to get cancelled, which would delay the application for most of the applicants. So which is why most of the universities back then decided to go test optional. And then by test optional, we mean is that you have a choice to take the SAT. You can either take the SAT or you cannot take the SAT, and that's completely your call. Now, a lot many of the universities that went test optional back then are now offering or are now asking students to take the SAT. So they do have the requirement back in place. But so just in case, if you have heard this term, this basically means that you have a choice to take the SAT, or you cannot, or you can take the SAT or you cannot take the SAT. But even then, when these universities were test optional, our recommendation to students was that they take the SAT, because you're not taking the SAT, so then you're simply increasing the burden on the rest of your profile, that is your OA level grades or your intermediate grades, percentages, and your college essays, your letter of recommendations, and everything else that you're basically submitting to a university in order to be considered. Now, once you share your SAT scores to them, so you're basically sharing the burden. Otherwise, the entire emphasis there will be on the rest of the things that you'll be submitting to them. So even for the test optional universities, we do recommend that the students take the SAT. Now, test blind is another term here. By test blind, we mean that the universities will not be looking at your SAT score. So even if excuse me, so even if you were to submit your SAT score, the universities will not be looking at your SAT scores. So in case if you're somebody who is considering one of the test blind university, or maybe you're somebody who does not like taking the test at all, you could look into some of the test blind universities, but please remember, if a university is test blind, so it may not be one of the better universities, or it may not be one of the universities that you would like to eventually go to. Test flexible means that you could either take the SAT, or you can take AP or advanced placement, in case if you know what it is, or there's another test that we have that is called ACT. So test flexible means that you have a choice to take any of these tests before you apply to a university. The next discussion beta that we have over here is, what SAT scores do we really need? Now, this may make this could surprise some of you, but there have been people, and you can pretty much read it on Reddit, or you can pretty much find it on YouTube, that there have been tons of people who have gotten with a score of 1450 into Ivy Leagues, but in such cases they had a very good profile. Now, what exactly do we mean by the word profile? Once again, so Fizza Beta, the profile means the rest of the things that you're basically applying to a university with. That basically includes your grades, your ECAs, your college essays, the letter of recommendations that your teacher must be writing, and in those letters, how well they are recommending you, and then once again, your internships, and whether you've gotten anything published yet, whether you've done sort of research that you've gotten published yet or not. So that's what we mean by profile. So remember, your very good SAT score can't make up for an average profile, though your very good profile can make up for your average SAT score. And for Ivy Leagues, this is an average score. For Ivy Leagues, anything between 1450 to 1530 is average. Yes, if you have anything above 1530 to 1600, so that's more advisable, beta. If you plan on applying to one of the state universities in US, so you can get into some of the good state universities with a score of 1200. Now, there are some state universities which require you to have a 1300, which require you to have a 1350. Some state universities which are more competitive than others require you to have a 1450 as well. So that depends on the university and the state and the program that you're applying to. So there are some universities where the SAT score requirement keeps on changing from one program to the other program. So it really depends on your majors as well. There are some universities which have a different SAT score requirement in US for in-state students and for out-of-state students. That means if you live in Texas, but if you're applying to a university in New York, so they could have a different score requirement for you than somebody who is already from New York, because for them you would be an out-of-state student. So you would not really be getting any sort of state benefits, because you would be coming to New York from a different state. So you need to do a bit of research that where exactly you plan on applying to, which program you plan on applying to, what SAT score they need, and that's something that you will have to do, because there are just too many of the universities in US, and of course it's really not possible for me to memorize the SAT score requirement for every program beta. For LUMS beta, I need you to notice this one thing that I'm telling you next. There have been people who get into LUMS, or who have gotten into LUMS with a score of 1200. But if they have a 1200, so they have a very good profile. By that I mean they either have 10 A stars and then 4 A stars if they have their A level results. Otherwise, for AS, you can say 4A only. And if you're coming from a matriculation or intermediate background, so they either have 94% and 95% in matriculation, another 90% in their first year, and then only they could be considered with this score. But that's not all you need for LUMS. You need ECS, you need a very good personal statement, you need all of that for LUMS as well. But if you plan on applying to one of their most sought after program, I would like to change it, because there have been a lot of my students who have not even gotten an acceptance on a score of 1400, 1420, 1430. Why? Because considering our social problems of our country, most people who once wanted to apply abroad cannot really apply anymore because of the financial issues. So what most people do here is that they end up considering their LUMS or IBA or Habib, and eventually what happens is that even LUMS of course is getting a lot more application than it previously used to. So the competition for LUMS has increased a lot as well. So even if you have a 1200, so I do recommend that you take your chances with LUMS, but make sure that you do have a very good profile. And in order to have a good application or a strong application, you need to have at least 1450 plus. Now, this ST requirement for LUMS could change depending upon the school and the program that you plan on applying to. LUMS is the name of a university. I'm sure some of you, all of you would know that. And LUMS has different schools. So it really depends on whether you want to pursue any of the business program there, any of the sciences or engineering program there, or any of the social sciences program there. So this SAT score requirement could keep on changing. For IBA, things have changed now. This was valid until a week ago. For IBA has recently changed and updated their SAT policy. Now, what IBA has clearly stated on their website, and that they did it only a week ago, that too when we had the December SAT on the same day. So now what they recommend is that if somebody's not confident about her SAT score, then he or she must take IB's own test. So what they basically mean, what used to happen previously is that if anybody had 1270 plus with a breakup of 600 and 600, so that person could have gotten his or her IBS test exempted, and that this person or any of these people or any person who had a score of 1270 with a minimum breakup of 600 in English and 600 in maths was simply eligible for the interview. But now we do not have that kind of luxury or option anymore. Now IBA has said it very clearly that if somebody is not confident about his or her SAT score, then he or she must consider taking IBA's own test. So what we do recommend now is that previously IBA used to give direct admissions on a score of 1450, 1460, 1470. So it wasn't a fixed requirement back then. Only this requirement was fixed. So now, given the new policy, what we advise now is if you plan on applying to IBA and if you want to get in directly, so we need to target at least 1470 plus for direct admission. And that's not even a safe score, just by the way. If you want to be safe, so what I do advise is that you target 1500 plus for direct admission. There is a lot of chance that you would be getting an interview call if you have anything less than 1450. So if you have anything less than or equal to 1450, chances are that you will be getting an interview call. And this has only changed once again recently. No, Zara, beta, they still do. I'll show you a screenshot where they have said it themselves that they do. So let me look it up for you. So you can see it says the SAT merit list will be compiled and announced along with the IB aptitude results. Therefore, if you believe your SAT is not among the top, we recommend appearing for the IBS aptitude test as well. And then it again says that if you skip IBS aptitude test and solely based on your SAT scores and do not qualify for direct admission or an interview as per analysis, you will be placed on the list of unsuccessful candidates. So that does tell you that they would be offering direct admissions on the basis of the SAT score. If you read this point, your concern will simply be addressed. So, but I'll continue with what I was telling you here. Is that for once again, since a lot many of you, I'm assuming since any of you, most of you have not yet replied me, considering I've asked you this question that what exactly or why exactly you wish to take the SAT, and I only one person has replied me yet. So once again, what I was telling you here is that in case you plan on taking DSAT for IBA, so you need to have at least 1470 plus for the direct admission. But if you want a safer score, so try 1500 plus. And if you have anything less than 1450, chances are that you will be getting an interview call. But this is yet to be seen. We'll see what happens because IBA has not yet made it clear that what sort of a course it will eventually be. So we will have to wait for round one's result to be able to understand this better. And if you're taking the March SAT, just by the way, please notice you will not be eligible for most of the tests. Now that IBA would have 3 different tests. So I'll explain that as well because some of you would not know this either. So IBA is now going to take its test schools wise, and IBA has broken down its tests into 3 different schools. So if you plan on applying to BBA or ACF or one of the newer programs, such as business analytics, so your test will now be held on February 9. Now the problem is if they're testing you on February 9, so your SAT score will not be out by the time they issue the result. So SAT March is not valid for this attempt. So if you plan on applying to IBA in round 1, so the SAT March score will simply not be relevant for this attempt. Now, if you talk about the computer sciences or maths program, once again, the test will be held on 2nd of March. So that means if you're taking the SAT on 8th of March, the results come out in 2 weeks. So that means your result will be out by 22nd of sorry, my bad. Your results will be out by another 2 weeks. That is 18th of March or 16th or 17th of March. So if your results come out by 16th March, so once again, you will not be eligible for this because by then the IBA must have announced their results and their list will be out. Though you can be considered for this program, these 3 programs, my bad. So if you plan on applying to BS Economics or BS Economics and Maths or BS Social Sciences, you can pretty much take the SAT for these programs. You can take the SAT March for these 3 programs, considering that your score will already be out and you will be eligible for these programs. Now, in case you plan on doing BBA or accounting and finance or business analytics or computer sciences or BS Maths, so please notice your SAT March score will only be relevant for the round 2. So if you plan on sitting or if you plan on taking the SAT March for any of these programs of IBA, so please notice your score will only be relevant for the round 2 attempt. Zarabita, I'll be taking all of the questions. Yes, Zarabita, we do have 2 rounds for IBA, which is one is in late June and the other one is in February. Now, please notice, Beta, this is also a very common question that many people do have. If you plan on applying to either LUMS or IBA, so for the BBA program of IBA or also for their business analytics program, I'll put it here because this criteria has changed a bit now. Again, this criteria was changed by IBA last week. By BSBA, I mean Bachelors of Science in Business Analytics. So for these 2 programs, we need 70%. And if you're coming from an A levels background, you need 2B1C. That's for IBA. And for all other BS programs, we need 60%. and we need 1B to C if you're coming from an A levels background. Now, if you were to talk about LUMS, so we need 2B, 1C there once again for all the programs, and we need 70% in the intermediate in order to be considered. But for LUMS, please remember that we have another requirement, which is not much of a requirement, but they usually do not tend to consider people who have fewer than 5 A's in their O levels or anything less than 80% in intermediate. There could be exceptions, so this is not something that they could not really make compromises on, but this is a case most of the time. So if you are somebody who could not do well in one of the O levels paper, or in one of your matriculation exams, so you need to make sure that the rest of your profile outshines the profile of the most of the candidates who are going to apply to LUMS, so that it could compensate for your weaker grade or your weaker percentage. Now, another common question that we keep getting, or we keep hearing, is, sir, what if I have a very stellar SAT score, but if for some reason if I end up with this grade, A star, and a D, so will LUMS make any compromises for me, or will LUMS change its policy for me? So no, they will not. Why? Because you're not really meeting this grade. You need to have this grade. Remember, once you hear from the university, because most of you will be hearing back from LUMS by June or before June, and your A levels result will not be out until August. Likewise, I'm not really sure when intermediate result comes out, but I'm sure it must be the same window. So what happens there is that LUMS will then be asking you to submit your grades or your percentage. And if you do not have required grades, so please notice your admission will simply be revoked, because the admission is only tentative till then. Tentative means it will be conditional to your grades. So if you do not have required grades, you will simply no longer be offered the same seat. Likewise, if you have anything like this, if you have an A and a B and a C, so of course you have the required grades, so you'll be let in. So what we must remember is that if you've been working so hard on your A levels or on your intermediate, please notice we only need these grades. So for as long as these grades are being taken care of, you're good to go. You can focus, you can divert the rest of your energy towards the SAT. And if you've been working day and night only to get an A star in every subject, so please remember you will not get in unless and until you have an equally well SAT score as well. Or in case you were taking LCAT, so then LCAT as well. But if you were to break down the percentage, since I prepare for both the programs, I prepare for SAT, I prepare for LCAT, I prepare for IBS test as well. So the percentage of the people who take the LCAT would be 10%, and the remaining 90% of the people get into LUMS through the SAT. And you can pretty much do your own research on that, and you would see, because most of the people who are applying to LUMS are applying to other universities as well. Usually LCAT is taken by the people who only want to go to LUMS and do not want to go elsewhere. So some of the timelines that we have now are these. You do have, in case you plan on applying to IBS, so you have IBS 1 attempt, you have SAT March available for IBS as well. Then you can take IBS round 2 test as well. You have this test as well. And then you have another test on 8th of June. This test will simply no longer be, okay, so we have the data available. So you must have your score available by 22nd of June in order to be considered. for round 2 of IBA in case if you plan on taking the SAT in June, which is something we do not really advise. So in case if you plan on taking it in May, which will again be overlapping your A levels exam date or your intermediate dates, so that's something again we do not really advise. So try getting done by the with the SAT by March, regardless of the fact whether you're taking the SAT for IBA or LUMS or for any of the other international university. And that's for the people who are currently in A2 or in the second year of their intermediate. People who are currently in AS, you can take the SAT in March. And even if you were to take the ACT just to check the vibe of it, how the ACT is like, this is a good attempt for you. And then you can, focus easily on the ACT in another attempt that is going to be ACT March for you right after your CIE. So you'll have 2 to 3 months to focus on the ACT after your CIEs or your intermediate exams. I'll come to the next part, but one of the students did ask me about this part. So I'll go over this. Please notice the SAT is a standardized test. It basically stands for Scholastic Aptitude Test. It's an adaptive test, but it's only sectionally adaptive. Now, what do we mean by sectionally adaptive? That's something that you'll have to pay good attention to. And I'll take 5 to 7 minutes explaining you this concept at what exactly we mean by sectionally adaptive. So let's say you and your friend are taking the SAT at the same standard. So let's say you scored 16 out of 22 on your first module of maths. But one of you asked me this thing, but of course, make sure that all of you are paying attention to this. So let's just say you scored 16 out of 22 in the maths module 1. Remember I said there are 2 modules. Now, these 22 questions that you have, they would be on a normal difficulty level. So if you get these 16 questions right out of 22, that would basically make the software, that would basically make the algorithm, in case if you know the word algorithm. So in case if you do use YouTube, so I'm sure you would know that they keep suggesting you the kind of content you're watching. Same goes for most of the social media platforms. So the Blue Book algorithm would think that you're actually a good student, and the next set of 22 questions in your module 2 will be difficult. And let's just say if you get 16 questions right once again, and remember these 22 questions are hard. Why exactly are they hard? Because apparently you got 16 questions right over here, which made the software think that you're actually a good student, which is why the next set of 22 questions will be hard. And let's just say if you get 16 of them right again, your score, hypothetically speaking, would be 640 on the maths. I'm saying hypothetically, it's all based on assumption, because there are other factors as well, because we do have a different scoring criteria for every paper on the SAT. So some papers do generally have easier questions. So the criteria would keep on varying paper by paper as well. And that applies for everyone who's taking the SAT in the world. So that should not really affect you in any way. Now, let's just say if your friend who's taking the SAT, let's just say he gets 14 questions right out of 22. You, on the other hand, got 16 questions right. So that would make the software think that this person is actually not a very good student when it comes to the maths, which is why his next 22 questions will be easy. And even if he gets 16 questions right, which is the same as yourself, remember, he's getting these easy questions right. You, on the other hand, got harder questions right. So your score is matching. You're both getting the same number of questions right, 16 and 16. But remember, his 22 questions were easier than yours, which is why College Board will be compensating this person accordingly. And the score for this person will be between 580 and 590. Why exactly is this the case? Because this person apparently got easier 16 questions right than you did. Your 22 questions were harder, his were easier, which is why College Board will be compensating, or which is why College Board will be grading him accordingly in terms of marks, and the score for this person will be 580 and between 580 and 590 beta. Is this concept clear to each of you? Arij, Iman, Fiza beta, Hamad? Yes, you can either unmute yourself or you can simply let me know over here. You can simply do a thumbs up. There's so many ways for you to acknowledge me. Zaki beta is clear, Rabia beta is clear, Umar, Umad, Zumir beta. Umar, you must have a PhD in this by now. Arij, is this clear to you? Fiza beta, is this clear? Hamna beta, is this clear? So that's what we essentially mean by that the SAT is now adaptive, but it's only sectionally adaptive. There's a paper that is a test that some of you may go on to take later on in your life when you're applying to the graduate programs. That is when you're leaving for your master's. GMAT. Some of you may have heard of this test. So it's adaptive, and it's adaptive question wise. So every question, every next question will keep on getting harder and harder based on how you're doing on the previous question. But that's not how SAT is. SAT is only sectionally adaptive. So your next set of 22 questions in maths or English will depend on how you do on your first section or first module. Now, what is usually the case is that most people are doing very well on their first modules, which is why their next module for both maths and English are harder. And that is going to be the case with you guys as well. That you guys are going to have a harder module 2 for both English and for maths as well. Okay, once again, if this concept is not clear to any of you yet, so please be vocal about it so that I go over this again with you. So, but another next question that I keep getting is the scholarships. Now, depending upon the university and the school that you plan on applying to, IBA used to get a lot of scholarships, but only recently, where everyone is asking them for the scholarship, they have made their criteria a bit strict, or a bit more strict. So what IB or LUMS do is that they both tell you to first apply either through the ACT or by taking their own test, their respective tests. So for IBA, you can take IBA's test, and for LUMS, you can take LCAT. And based on that, they see that whether you're really getting a spot there or not. And if you think that, or if they think that you've really, cleared the cutoff, or if you've made it to these universities, so then after that beta, they ask you whether you'll be needing any sort of financial assistance. And it isn't like the agencies will be nice enough to keep asking you whether you'll be needing any sort of financial assistance or not. It's just that you have to stay updated on your part. So they issue another form for financial assistance that you will have to fill, and then you're supposed to, attach the relevant documents with that. That could be your father's salary slip. That could be some of the other tax documents. That could be how many dependents there are in your family. Copies of your utility bills. So you have to all of that and to get the scholarship. But only recently the criteria is becoming harder and harder. Why? Because literally everyone wants to get some kind of a scholarship now. I'm sure some of you would already know this, that there are a lot many universities that offer scholarships on the basis of the ACT scores. Billions of dollars of scholarships are awarded every year on the basis of the ACT scores. So once again, you'll have to narrow down. You'll have to see which universities you plan on applying to, and if you need a scholarship, so you can accordingly, apply multiple filters. You can apply the scholarship filter there. You apply a program filter there, and then you can eventually narrow down if you have a budget. So you can see that which of the universities do fall in your budget and what thing is. You will have to do a lot of homework on your part before you decide on a university. In Canada, we do not have universities that require you to take the ACT. There are very few universities that would want you to take the SAT, or that would want you to have the SAT, or that would even consider your SAT score. Most universities in Canada do not require you to take the SAT. Same goes with Australia, Australian universities as well. Though they could look at your SAT score if you have taken, but they do not have that as one of their requirements. But if in the SAT and you're applying to US and Australia both, so you put your SAT score there, that would simply help them understand that what kind of a person you are, and they may offer you scholarship based on that, because that would simply tell them that you have taken an international test, so they would know that what kind of person you, someone is applying with his or her intermediate score, say intermediate percentage, that is 85 percentage, and the same person is also applying with an SCT score of 1490 or 1500. So Australian universities will place more, or let's just say will give more consideration to the SAT score than your intermediate, because they do not know how easy or difficult it is to get an 85 percentage. Know the same for SAT, and you could get the scholarship basis on the basis of this. But once again, I'm not saying that you should take the SAT for Australian universities, because there's no requirement. But if you're applying to multiple countries or even multiple countries, so then there's no harm in sending your SAT score as well in your overall application. Physical beta largely grades and IELTS, and in case if they need any other test, so you can take those tests as well. But usually it's Duolingo or IELTS, and the rest of your level grades, and that's it. And then some of the universities would ask you to write personal statements as well, which, by the way, most of the universities will do. But it's IELTS largely, and once again, IELTS is not an aptitude test. It's only a language proficiency test that only tells them whether you can speak, listen, and understand English or not. But if there's something additional that I would like you to know over here, this definitely is not something that you must understand for the SAT, but it's important that you understand in order to take the first step towards your university. The reason why all of us work so hard, or the reason why I worked hard, I was taking the SAT, or the reason why most people work super hard to the SAT, is because it really decides. Eventually, it's one of the biggest of the factors that the universities usually have when they're considering your application. And any university will eventually decide that what kind of future, or what kind of career prospects you are going to have. So I'll give you an example for the better universities in Pakistan, such as IB and LUMS. What IB and LUMS do is that both of these have a lot of drives, where where most big employers from Pakistan do come and they conduct campus drives. They offer on site or on campus interviews to the students when they're student in their seventh semester or sixth semester. Just by the way, you will be having 8 semesters, a total of 8 semesters in your undergraduate programs. So these people are offered on-site interviews, and if they do well, they're offered another interview, and then another interview, and that's how they get a job. That too when they're still in a university, and that too when they have not yet graduated. And that would happen if you go to a tier A university, and that would not happen if you go to a tier C university. I'm sure some of you would know what tier B universities are, regardless of the cities you're living in, be it Karachi, be it Islamabad, be it Lahore, regardless of where you're taking this class from. So I'm sure you would know some of the tier B and tier C universities. And if you're taking this class outside of Pakistan, you would know that what kind of tier B and C universities you have in your respective cities. So that this goes for all of the tier A universities that do have industry connections. Why does it happen is something that I would like us to talk about, because look, most of us deep down want to go into a university just because of this one word, that employability. No matter how much sugar how we sugarcoat it, it eventually comes down to this, that is employability and a very good future. So when I was there at your place, there used to be a lot of jobs in the newspaper, and then these jobs ended up going to job portals. Now, each of the good universities would have their own job portals where the employers keep placing the jobs, and they would already have access to CV database. So there will be times when you'll be getting calls from employers who you have not even yet applied to, and they would be offering you job offers or job interviews. That would happen if you end up in a good university. So deep down, why exactly we want to do well on the ACT? Because we simply end up in a good UCs, because that will open the doors for so many of the other opportunities for us. And remember, all of the organizations, they have their own culture. Unilever has their own culture. Kareem has their own culture. Procter and Gamble has their own culture. So every organization has its own culture. These organizations have a history of hiring people from IB and LUMS, and they do not really want their practice, because every time they do change their practice, they suffer. So if they hire from tier B schools or tier C schools, what happens then is that that person not really able to get in, which is why they have to hire again. They'll have to retrain that person again. They will have to, make that person stay in a hotel again, so that he could get his or her training for another 2 months, 3 months. And remember, organizations are not really willing to waste their resources. So, which is why they keep on hiring from the same universities again. Why? Because they have a history of hiring from these universities, and they do know that how well this person will be able to get in, what kind of pressure he or she can take in, and whether he or she can take this step or not. So, organizations have a history, and they do know that what kind of stress management this person has been taught in the university, and whether he or she is a good fit for us or not. So eventually, if you plan on staying back here in Pakistan, or if you want to work before you go for your masters, so remember, all of these things are going to matter once you apply there to your first job. So remember, your university does matter, and which is why we place a strong emphasis on a good SAT score, because that, of course, is one of the filters that universities have when they're looking at the application. So I just wanted to put it out there for some of you who are not really updated. In case if you are taking the SAT for some of the other universities, so we do have a lot of universities, including CBM, Zabis, Habib. For Habib, the requirement is 1400, though. For NUST Business School, you can take the SAT, and you can apply there with a score of 1200. For FAST, we can get in with a score of 1200 as well. And are some of the other units that would accept your SAT scores, and depending upon where exactly you plan on applying to, and that's for the local universities only. Also, but I would like us to address some of the myths here that some of you may have already. Myth number one is that you do not have to study. You can check with anyone who has taken the SAT, so you can check with them that you have to study for the SAT. So do not really take the risk of not studying the SAT, because eventually, if you do take this risk, you will study the SAT. Once you have to study for the SAT eventually. So the sooner you do, the better it is. Myth number two is that I have a really bad grade in mathematics. So do you really think I can do it? So even if you were to watch my 5-year-old recording, I have answered this the same way I'm going to answer this. That every year we do have a lot many students who come to us from medical backgrounds or pre-medical backgrounds, and they take the SAT and they do pretty fine. We have a lot many of the students even this year who took the MDCAT exam. Somehow they did not get into their desired medical colleges, or their MDCATs kept on canceling for sin or for one reason or the other. And now they're so sick of it that they want to take the SAT, or they want to apply to one of the business schools, and they are doing so well, and they've done so well in their SATs. So it's really up to you. So your academic background does not matter as much as your do. So you're willing to work hard for it. You're bad at maths will not matter as such, as long as you're willing to put in the hard work, and for as long as you're willing to improve SATs. So if you're somebody who either struggles with math or English, so it's just that you'll have to put in more time as compared to others. Myth number 3 that we have here is that, sir, I've heard that no matter how much we study for the SAT, our score simply cannot be improved. But you will see, and you will see yourself debunking this myth as you progress, as you study for the SAT, is that people not will to study for the SAT seriously, and then they keep on blaming the college board. So if you plan on taking the SAT, remember that you have to study for it. It's those texts for which people either study for at least 3 to 6 months, unless and you only need minor improvement. By minor improvement, I mean that you're already studying at 1200 and you needed 1300, and that's fine. You could do this kind of improvement in 1 month. But if you're somebody who's already studying at 1100 and you plan getting a fit, so you need a good 3 months of practice for this kind of improvement. But for that, of course, you have to study. And once again, if you're not really willing to study, you will be saying that no matter how hard you work, eventually you do not really get a good score on the ST. But once again, that's not really true. But once again, timeline that will have would be like this. So we tend to have the course, we'll have the course done by 20th of Feb, and we spend the rest of the time doing extra practice drills, queries that so we do the course related queries, have record the queries, and ones that we do not have queries with query videos for, you can get them answered in the class. But we get done with that, or we'll get done by that by 20th of Feb, and then we'll only be focusing on the papers in this time period and the rest of this time period. Also remember, most of the content that we will be making you practice from is from the college board. Remember, the college board is not the same as Khan Academy. In case you plan on practicing from Khan Academy, you can do that. But if you plan on practicing Khan Academy, I would like you guys to do a bit of research. And particularly, you can do this research from Reddit as well, in case if you know what Reddit is. That content has not been written by college board. This content has been written by Sal Khan and his team. So I prefer this content over this content. I'm not really stopping any of you from practicing on Khan Academy. You can pretty much practice if you want to. But remember, when it comes to college board, we do not have to do material, or we do not have to practice on the material that is more difficult or less difficult than the actual college board question. Because if it's less difficult, your score again will not be a true representation of the score that you are likely to get. And if it's more difficult than the college board questions, because we do have some of the questions from different publishers which have really been asked in the same way the college board really asked the question. And when students do attempt those questions, their scores are significantly affected, and which is why they keep feeling demoralized. Now, that's not something that you need to do when you have your SED in another 2 to 3 months. So, which is why what I advise is that we only practice from the relevant material. So, what I have done here at Tutor Plus is that I do have a lot of content that I've migrated from the previous version of the SATs when they used to release the papers. Even then, they would not release all the papers, but it was not as difficult to get the papers. Even there used to be some websites which used to sell papers once the paper has been conducted. So I have all of those college board papers, and I have migrated and shifted a lot of relevant material which can still be used for DSAT. So we can't really use those longer reading passages that we used to have on the reading section of the SAT, because now we have shorter passages. But there are a lot many topics on maths and also on the writing section of the SAT, which used to be there on the previous version of the SAT. I mean, the rules of the grammar have not, of course, changed. In DSAT, it's the same grammar, it's the same pronouns, same verbs, same essential and non-essential clauses. Same. We had transitions before as well. We have the topic name transition on DSAT as well. So what I do prefer is that we prefer the College Board content, because that content has been written by the same examiner who's going to write your test, beta. Is this part clear to each of you? Umair, Hamna, Fiza, Arish, beta, Zakia, is this clear? Umair, Hamna, Ijaz, beta, Arish. It's important, beta, that we address that why exactly people end up taking a bad score on the SAT. A, if you plan on taking the SAT, but if you do know that you're not really disciplined, then I do not really recommend that you take the SAT, because you will not be able to get a good score on the SAT if you are somebody who lacks discipline. So there are so many people, or there have been so many people who are hoping that they would get a perfect score on the SAT, and they end up getting a score in 3 digits, that is less than 1,000. And there are people who are hoping that they would not go past 1,200, and they end up getting 1,500. So if you are somebody who lacks discipline, so I would not recommend that you take the SAT. And if you lack the discipline, once again, it isn't like that you'll always keep on lacking on. It's just that you'll have to be serious, and you'll have to be dedicated in order to get a good score on the SAT, regardless of your academic background. So if you are somebody who you think that keeps on getting distracted, or can't really focus, or does not really want to study, or does not want to have a proper studying schedule, so that could be a big reason in your getting a poor score on the SAT. If you lack the strategy, that's also one of the factors that does contribute. So if you are somebody who's still practicing from the old version of the SAT, that is the paper version of the SAT, so that does also contribute significantly towards your poor score, because there are people who are not really sure that the SAT has changed. So I still see people practicing questions from the previous version of the SAT. So there are questions that can still be tested from the previous version of the SAT, but not all of the content from the previous version of the SAT is relevant anymore. And perseverance is that you'll have to be consistent. So it isn't like that you can study for 1 day and then you cannot study for 2 days or 3 days. So if you are somebody, once again, who could either study on 1 day and then not study for another 3 days simply just because you do not feel like. So remember, there's nothing like I do not feel like studying on the SAT. You just have to study for it. It's a classic test. It's a different test. It's a difficult test. You have not done anything like this before. So for this, you have to study. Another meaning that we have for perseverance here is that perseverance means that every time you feel like giving up on it, or every time you feel like you cannot really do it, so telling yourself that you're gonna do it and you're gonna do very well on this is what we define as perseverance. Another meaning I keep giving perseverance here is that every time you fall down, you have to dust yourself up, and you'll have to get back up on the saddle. So that's again perseverance as well. So you'll have to be consistent, no matter if the improvement is coming or not. Just be consistent, the improvement will come, trust me. On the part of the institutes, of course, one of the things that really matters is the experience of the teachers. We do have a lot of OA levels institutes now, which have now started offering DSAT. Uh, so remember, do not really confuse an OA levels institute with a test preparation institute. So test preparation institutes are different from OA levels institutes, and we do have institutes here around us as well, where there are people who took their SAT the last year and now they've become the teacher for some reason, even with a terrible score. So that's something that you'll have to look into yourself. Again, the relevant practice. Again, what kind of practice is the teacher, the institute making me do? Because that's super important as well. Communication gap is again very important, and how well you are connected to your teacher and how while the teacher is connected to you. Because if there's a serious communication gap, if you can't really convey your concerns to the teacher does not have a space to address or to listen to your concerns. So that also contributes to an overall bad score. So that's something that you guys have to pay close attention to. The class timing beta that we're going to have would be 9 to 11 p.m. So in case if you want to copy this, you can copy this. Now, one of the questions that I do get now is, so how long is the ACT for, or what exactly is the timing duration? So the entire SAT lasts for 2 hours and 14 minutes. There's no essay on this SAT. There was no essay on the last version of the SAT anymore. There used to be until COVID, and then they removed that option. And on DSAT or digital SAT, there has never been an essay. So you may see an option of practicing the essay when you're registering for the SAT, but that is not going to be there on your actual SAT exam, though you may see an option to practice the essay on your Blue Book app, but it's not relevant for our SAT exam. One of the question is, digital SAT is easy, so should I practice for it? So a very basic answer that I have for this is that how about you take a diagnostic test and you see if you find it easy or if you do not find it easy. Either you will find it easy or you will not find it easy. It will be one of the two things. But it will tell you what your exact score is and where exactly you currently stand in terms of their SAT score and what kind of a practice we eventually need in order to bump up our score. So the only reason people started calling it easy when the change was announced back in March 2023 was because previously we had the calculator enabled on one section, and now we have the calculator enabled on both the sections. So that's a plus, that's a good thing. Another reason why people call it easy is that previously we used to have very long passages in the reading section of the SAT. Now we have one passage dedicated to each questions on the SAT. And once again, since you have not really taken that version of the SAT, so you would not be able to understand the difference very clearly. So people who were taking both version of the SAT, that's the paper version and the digital version, thought that the digital version was easy. But remember, if you find it easy, that basically means that you're doing bad on the SAT, on DSAT. So if you find it easy, that means that you have messed up in your module 1, which is why you're finding the module 2 easy, and which is why your score will be affected. So in case if you find it easy, so that means that you have once again not done well on your first module. So that's something that you'll have to look into. But yeah, there are topics which would be ridiculously easy, and there are topics which are seriously challenging on the SAT. So we could have some ridiculously easy questions on the SAT, and we could have some seriously challenging questions on the SAT as well. So that's something that you'll have to get good at eventually. And that happens with a lot of practice, but these are the days that we're gonna follow. So we're gonna have Monday, Tuesday for maths. We're gonna have Wednesday and Thursday for the English portion of the SAT. For this week, we'll be doing maths on Wednesday as well, and then we'll do English here because maths comparatively has more content than English does. And then we'll have 2 days for 2 days for English and then 2 days for maths from the coming week. So you can copy this as well if you wish to. But I'll be taking your questions now for the SAT. Meanwhile, but still, I would want you to get 1 bookmarks and 1 sticky notes and 3 notebooks because eventually we'll have to practice a lot. But also, but if you have any questions, we'll start taking questions from the start. So Zahra, I've answered that already, that IBA does consider the SAT for the direct admission. Professor would have answered that. Okay, I'll show you guys a paper, that what exactly a paper looks like, so that you guys know what the math portion is like, and then you can see what the English paper is, or English content is like on the SAT. So we are going to have it all. It will always be starting off with these vocabulary questions. So even when you're taking the actual SAT, it will always be starting off with these vocabulary questions. So you have some straight vocabulary questions there. So the vocabulary questions are tested in two ways. One way is which choice completes the text with most logical and precise words or phrase. Another way that they have to test this is that in the text, what does the word this or what does the underlined word mean? And then you could have some of the functions question where they want you to tell that what functions the underlying lines serve, and then you could have some of the main purpose or main idea question. Once again, question number 5 is same as question number 6. Question number 8 is same as question number 6. Once again, we have to tell that what purpose the underlying lines serve. Then we could have some dual passages question. In such question, we have to tell what exactly the author of one text will think of the text in the other passage. Then you have some main idea question. Then you have some of the command of evidence question where we have to make use of the data and the information, and then we have to answer it. Then we can have some literal analysis question where we have to look for the information which either supports the data or weakens the information or supports the information. Fourteen is again command of evidence. We'll have to look at the paragraph, we'll have to look at the data, we'll have to answer the two in conjunction. 15 is same. 16 is again similar to one of the questions that we did. It says which finding, if true, would most directly support the researcher's hypothesis. So the researcher may have come up with something, with some finding. We have to see that which of the answer or which of the given options would support his theory. So these are properly defined topics or properly lengthy topics, as I'm just giving you guys a quick overview of what the paper is like. Then we have some logical completion question. We have to tell that if you were an author of this paragraph, how would you have concluded this paragraph? So we have 3 of these questions on the SAT as well. And then we have the writing part where we have to make use of the grammar. So the assignment here in all of these questions would stay the same, which is what choice completes the text so that it conforms to the convention of standard English. So these are all questions based on grammar. Once again, testing the usage of punctuation in this in 22nd. In 23rd, they're testing the verb. In 24th, it's again punctuation. 25th, again punctuation. 26th, they're testing transition. So they're transitioning from one sentence to the other one, and we're supposed to choose the correct transition. This is the easiest of the topic on the SAT. Then we have another question on transition, and then we have practical synthesis, where we have some bullet points, and then we have to make use of the bullet points to answer the question. And in all of these practical synthesis questions, the student must be trying to accomplish something. So we have to tell that how exactly of which notes he has to make use of to accomplish what he wishes to accomplish. And then module 2 would have the same set of questions. So I'll quickly go over to the math section over here. Some of the math questions could be ridiculously easy, as I said. So you could see, and you can pretty much laugh when you look at question number 1 over here. So all you have to do is take out the value for P over here. That's it. Question 2 is again a relatively easy question. But the topic here is a scatter plot. But I'm assuming in case if you have not really studied the scatter plots, you would not know what to do in this. But once you have done it, so it would be easy. Question 3 again is an easy question. All you have to do is take out the value for k over there. 4 is an inequality question. 5 is not much of a is kind of a projectile motion question, but all we have to tell is that for which of the following intervals the height of the object was increasing. So we have to tell it when exactly the height was increasing. Then we have another functions question. Then we have another function questions. And then we have another exponential function question. Then we have another inequality question. Then we have another inequality question followed by another function question. Then we have a bit of right angle triangle. Then we have basic algebra there. Question number 15 is another question which is based on graph. And 17 is again an easy question. All you have to do is make C your subject there. Question 18 is a sum of roots question where we have to take out the value for W there by solving the quadratic equation. Question number 19 is from statistics. You are supposed to take out the median of the data. 20th is again a basic coordinate geometry question. 21st is a parabola question. It's a topic there on the ACT in case you've not really heard that word before. 22nd is a percentages question. Then we have another equation of circle question. Then we have another basic trigonometry right angle triangle question. 25th is again exponential function question. 26th is again function questions. And then we have another right angle triangle question, and that's this module. Now, that would usually be your easier module when you're taking the paper digitally on your laptop. The second module would have harder questions. Now, this one may not have as many hard questions as the actual digital exam would do. It's only a sample for now, but you could see it for yourself once you're practicing one of the papers. So I'll just quickly go over the questions here for you, so you could have an idea what the questions could look like. So each bit, this is what an exam would look like. But if any of you has any other questions, so please do let me know. Otherwise, I'll proceed. Hamad beta, do you have a question? Fiza, Arish beta, Rabia, Rahu beta, do you have a question? Rayan, Umair, Hamna Ijaz beta, Umaid, Zumeer beta, Zakiya beta, do you have a question? Rayan. Guys, if you have no question, you could just let me know that you have no questions. But there is no negative marking as such. But the way the paper is structured is that the more questions you get right, the more your marks will be. But there is no negative marking. So these are two different things. So if you get something wrong, will they be deducting the marks for that? So no, they will not be deducting the marks for that. So you will only be getting the marks for the question that you get right. So there is no negative marking. But remember, the more questions you get right, the higher your score will be. But if you get anything wrong, will they deduct any marks? So no, they do not really deduct marks. They simply do not really give you marks for that. which is why your score is less. I'll give you an example. You're going to have 22 questions or 44 questions on maths. So if you get only 35 questions right out of 44, so you'll only be given the marks for 35. They will not be deducting any marks for those 9 questions that you will get wrong. It's just that your score will be only for those 35 questions that you would get right. So it's just that. But there is no negative marking as such on the SAT. G Ahmad Peta, we will either be done by 20th of Feb or even before that, because it isn't like it will practice once we are done with the course. So we'll keep practicing throughout. It's just that we'll only be practicing once we're done with the course and everything. But it does not at all mean that we'll start practicing after 20th of Feb. We will be practicing from day one. So kindly do not think they will start practicing once the course is finished. It's just that we'll solely be doing full length tests, and we'll make you do one of the full length tests this coming week. We, for all of our students, we make them take a diagnostic test. So every single of you will be asked to take a diagnostic test to see what your current score is, unless uh, you have taken the SAT before or an official SAT before, and for us that could serve as your baseline score. But if you're not taken the SAT before, so what we need to do here is that we need to see that what your current or what your baseline score is. बेसलाइन स्कोर का मतलब ये होता है कि आप अगर कल सुबह जाके एसटी देते हैं तो आपका स्कोर क्या होगा, उसको हम बेसलाइन स्कोर बोलते हैं. And then what we are going to do here is that we're going to have a one-on-one session with you. One-on-one session में आप होते हैं, कुछ बच्चों के पेरेंट्स भी होते हैं, क्योंकि वो खुद इन्वॉल्व होते हैं तो वो रिक्वेस्ट करते हैं. हमें भी अच्छा लगता है if the parents are involved as well. But if your parents are not involved, so that's fine as well, because 80 to 90% बच्चों के पेरेंट्स one-on-one sessions में नहीं होते. तो it's understandable that you are a mature, that you guys are mature now and you are responsible for what you're doing. तो आप खुद भी वो सेशन को दे सकते हैं. और होता क्या है कि उस सेशन में हम देखते हैं कि आपका करंट स्कोर क्या है. देन वी सिट डाउन विद यू, देन वी आस्क यू कि हम कौन कौन सी चीज़ को कंसिडर कर रहे हैं. हम कभी भी ये नहीं कहते किसी को कि अच्छा तुम्हारा ये स्कोर है तो तुम इस यूनिवर्सिटी तो अप्लाई ही ना करो. इट्स जस्ट दैट कि हम उस बच्चे का हार्डवर्क उसको बताते हैं कि उसको कैसे पढ़ना पड़ेगा. तो somebody wishes to get into LUMS और उसका स्कोर बेशक 800 है, तो हम उसको डिस्कस नहीं करते कि नहीं तुम तो लम्स जा ही नहीं सकते. हम उसको ये बताते हैं कि अब लम्स जाने के लिए पढ़ना कैसे पड़ेगा. अब इसी तरह if somebody has a score of 1350 and that person also wishes to go to LUMS, तो हम उसको भी ये बताते हैं कि अब उसको कैसे पढ़ना पड़ेगा. तो हर किसी का कस्टमाइज प्लान जो है वो एक वन ऑन वन सेशन में बनता है, that we can only do once we have taken the test. तो हम यही करेंगे कि हम इधर ट्यूसडे को या वेंसडे को आपको एक टेस्ट देंगे करने को, वो आपको करना पड़ेगा. हमारे बेटा देर आर 6 to 10 टेस्ट, एट मैक्स 10 टेस्ट ही होते हैं, क्योंकि अभी हमारे पास उससे ज्यादा बने हुए ही नहीं है. तो हम आपके 10 टेस्ट तक ले सकते हैं. हो सकता है हम 10 से कम लें, इसमें बहुत सारी चीजें मैटर करी होंगी. आप कहेंगे कि सर टेस्ट नहीं लेते, या आप में से कुछ लोग कहेंगे सर हम टेस्ट नहीं लेते. कुछ बच्चे कहेंगे सर मुझे टेस्ट देते हैं, मेरी तो सारी क्यूरीज ऑलरेडी आंसर्ड है. मेजोरिटी क्लास कहेगी नहीं सर आप कुछ क्यूरीज करा दें, टेस्ट को तो मुझे पता है हमने इतने सारे दे दिए हैं. तो इट कीप्स ऑन वेरिंग फ्रॉम बैच टू बैच. Hamad beta, did I answer your question? अच्छा बेटा, दिस इज इट फॉर नाउ. एक रिक्वेस्ट जो मेरी अब आप लोग से होगी वो ये है कि इफ यू आर एडेड टू अ व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप, तो वहां पे आप अपनी जीमेल एड्रेस शेयर कर दें. अब होता ये कि either tomorrow or day after tomorrow will be sharing a Google Drive with you. उस Google Drive के अंदर बहुत सारी चीजें होती हैं. मैं थोड़ा सा आपको पेपर के लिए ये बता देता हूँ, जो चीजें जनरल हैं. अभी हम मीटिंग खत्म नहीं करें, तो इट्स इम्पोर्टेंट यू लिसन टू मी कि एसटीटी के लिए ना आपको थोड़ा सा पढ़ना पड़ेगा. अब मैं आगे वाली बात कर रहा हूँ बिकॉज मैंने आपके क्वेश्चंस का वेट करा है और सिर्फ मैंने अपनी बात नहीं करी है. तो आई गिव यू गाइस टाइम टू आस्क मी द क्वेश्चंस, बट अब अगर आपके क्वेश्चन नहीं है तो मैं आगे बात करता हूँ. देखिए बेटा, देयर थ्री कंपोनेंट्स. वन इज रीडिंग, अदर वन इज राइटिंग, Another one is maths. अब तीनों को अलग अलग देखते हैं। जैसे आप एक डॉक्टर के पास गए और आप कह रहे हैं कि मुझे 3 प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, तो तीनों की अलग अलग मेडिसिन आपको देगा। So maths, if you want to bump up your maths score, so that's for maths. I'll come back to this in a bit. A lot of practice. So maths में दो ही चीजें होती हैं. You first, and then once you have understood the topic well, so you need to practice as much questions, my bad, as many questions as you possibly can. राइटिंग में आपके पास रूल्स हैं. रूल्स का मतलब ये है कि यहाँ पे कॉमा आता है तो कॉमा के डिफाइंड रूल्स हैं. वो रूल्स मैंने नहीं बनाए हैं. जब मैं सीटी दे रहा था तो मैंने भी सेम रूल्स पढ़े थे. समाय कॉलन का एक अलग रूल है, लॉन्ग डैश का एक अलग रूल है. ये सिर्फ हम पंक्चुएशन की बात करें. ट्रांजिशन इज अनदर टॉपिक, एंड देन वी हैव अदर different rules on transition, essential and non-essential clauses, another paper, and we have different rules for that as well. And then for pronouns, we have different rules. For verbs, we have different rules. So writing is based on rules. So once you have understood the rules, so you need to do a lot of practice, and that's 1200 of your SCD score. 800 for maths, 400 for writing. The remaining 400 is something that most of the people usually suffer in. And considering that most of the people do not have a reading background, and when I say reading background, I do not really at all mean that people do not know how to read. So I'm not really referring to the literal reading. I am in a way referring to literal reading, but मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि आपको read करना नहीं आता. What I'm saying is that most people cannot really understand the complex passages. Why? Because most people simply do not even do academic reading, because all we do is refer to the notes of the teacher. So we do not even know what our intermediate or our A levels books look like, because we never bothered buying them. We only refer to teachers' notes, which is why we have a really terrible reading background. We do not know how to understand and process complex passages. But on the SAT, you would have a lot of complex passages. So for that, what SAT or what College Board recommends is that you read, and they have issued a proper list of the books and magazines that you must read before you take your actual SAT. So the more you read in addition to the practice, the better your reading score will be. Now, if you're somebody who's not really willing to read, So remember, your SAT reading score will not improve because I will tell you tricks, I will tell you the shortcuts, I will tell you how to process this passage. But अगर आपको क्वेश्चन ही समझ में नहीं आ रहा, पैसेज ही समझ में नहीं आ रहा, तो वो फिर आपको मेरी कोई ट्रिक हेल्प नहीं करेगी रीडिंग में. राइटिंग में आपका स्कोर अच्छा हो जाएगा, मैथ्स में अच्छा हो जाएगा, बट रीडिंग इज समथिंग in which you'll have to genuinely put in effort, and for that you'll have to actually read. And for that we will be sharing a lot of books with you, and you will be assigned a lot of those books which you'll have to read weekly. तो वो सिर्फ हम नहीं करते, वो दुनिया में जितने लोगों का अच्छा एसएटी स्कोर आता है वो सब करते हैं. तो ये आपको भी करना है. वंस अगेन, अगर आपको इसमें से कुछ किसी भी चीज को वेरीफाई करना हो, यू हैव यूट्यूब, यू हैव रेडिट, सो यू कैन सी व्हाट परफेक्ट स्कोर्स डू. सो हम सिर्फ वही कर रहे हैं जो कि मैंने करा था जब मैंने 15 साल पहले से दिया था, और जो मैं आज तक 4,500-5,000 लोगों को करा चुका हूँ जिनको मैंने प्रिपेयर करा है. तो मैं आपके लिए कुछ डिफरेंट नहीं ट्राई कर रहा, ना ही आप मेरे लिए कोई गिनिया पिग हैं या मैं कुछ आपके ऊपर एक्सपेरिमेंट कर रहा हूँ. दिस इज व्हाट आई बीन डूइंग फॉर द लास्ट 13 or 14 years विद ऑल ऑफ माई बैचेस, विद ऑल ऑफ माई स्टूडेंट्स. तो आई नो व्हाट वर्क्स एंड आई नो व्हाट डज नॉट वर्क. तो मैं आपके साथ भी वही करूंगा. तो इट्स जस्ट दैट यू हैव टू ट्रस्ट द प्रोसेस एंड यू हैव टू बी एबल टू पुट इन टाइम. बेटा जी, रबिया बेटा, डेस्मोस इज एनेबल ऑन दी एसटी नाउ. हम डेस्मोस यूज करते हैं. आई वुड हैव अ टैब ओपन यहाँ पे शायद कहीं पे. तो वी यूज इट ऑफन फॉर ऑल ऑफ आवर एसटी मैथ्स क्लासेस. लेकिन ये एसटी में है, ये आईबीए के टेस्ट में नहीं है. तो इनके सिर्फ एनी ऑफ यू इज आल्सो टेकिंग आईबीएस टेस्ट एज वेल, क्योंकि बहुत सारे बच्चे अब एसटी के बाद आईबीए का टेस्ट भी दे रहे हैं आजकल. हमारे पास भी बहुत सारे इस तरह बच्चे हैं. तो अब उनको यही बताते हैं कि सिटी में कुछ आपकी आदतें बिगड़ भी जाएंगी. दैट इज द यूज ऑफ द कैलकुलेटर एंड यूज ऑफ द डेस्मोस. बट आईबी के टेस्ट में ऐसा नहीं होता है. तो या दैट्स आल्सो अ प्लस फॉर द सिटी. बेटा इन केस इफ एनी ऑफ यू हैज एनी क्वेश्चन तो प्लीज मुझे बता दें. अदरवाइज ऑल यू हैव टू डू फॉर नाउ, शेयर योर जीमेल एड्रेस फॉर नाउ ऑन द ग्रुप. और की बात फिर हम विल हैव अ प्रॉपर मैथ्स क्लास टुमारो एंड डे आफ्टर टुमारो. एंड थर्सडे को हमारी इंग्लिश की क्लास होगी. दैट्स द प्लान फॉर दिस कमिंग वीक. बेटा इन केस अगर आपका कोई क्वेश्चन रह गया है दैट आई कुड नॉट आंसर, तो प्लीज आस्क मी हियर. अगर आपको क्वेश्चन बाद में याद आए तो यू कैन जस्ट रीच अस आउट ऑन द व्हाट्सएप चैट. मैं आपको यहाँ पे एक नंबर भी दे देता हूँ इन केस इफ यू विश टू रीच मी आउट पर्सनली. तो आप वहाँ पे मुझे टेक्स्ट कर दिएगा, वो मैं आपको ग्रुप पे भी शेयर कर देता हूँ. ठीक है बेटा, I'll see you guys tomorrow inshallah. Take care, Allah Hafiz. And make sure to state your Gmail addresses, बेटा. Allah Hafiz.